In this video, we'll be taking a look at 5 college basketball games happening on January 8th, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 10 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 5 college basketball games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start, if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Northwestern versus Michigan State. Breslin on a cold January night is basically a pressure cooker with bleachers. You have a Michigan State group that has already settled into a very clear identity, locking in defensively and using that defense to squeeze teams until the game tilts their way. They come in sitting at 13-2 overall and 3-1 in the Big Ten, sitting in that top tier nationally in both the NCAA and the efficiency metrics that actually matter to odds makers. Across from them you have Northwestern at 8-6, winless in the league at 0-3, trying to talk itself into a reset just a few days after blowing a late lead at home to Minnesota in an 84-78 loss where the Gophers walked out with a 13-rebound edge. That is not exactly the emotional footing you want walking into East Lansing with students back in the building and very ready to yell at you for 2 straight hours. Here is the thing, Michigan State is not just good defensively, they are built like the kind of team that punishes every soft spot Northwestern has been showing. They hold opponents to about 64 points per game, top 15 in the country, and the underlying efficiency numbers are even nastier, with that defense graded as one of the very best in the entire nation. On top of that, they rebound like a team that takes missed shots personally, sitting 5th nationally in rebound margin at plus 13.8, which is absurd in a high major league. Now put that next to a Northwestern side that has quietly gone from defense-first nuisance to fun offense, slightly stressed-out defense, giving up just over 70 points a night overall and a jarring 85 per game once Big Ten play started. Local coverage has already been waving the flag that this is one of the weaker defensive groups they have had in recent seasons, which is not what you want to hear right before you run into an opponent that lives on effort, length, and second chances. Northwestern does have one superpower that makes this matchup interesting, and honestly, it is the one thing keeping this from feeling completely lopsided. They take care of the ball absurdly well. We are talking number 1 nationally in assist-to-turnover ratio, number 1 in fewest turnovers per game, living in that 8-9 giveaways range on an average night. That kind of ball security usually travels, and it is why, even in that loss to Minnesota, they still put up 78 and had long stretches where the offense looked smooth and confident. The problem is that when your main strength is we always get a shot up, walking into the building of an elite defensive team that also swallows the glass is like showing up to a poker night where the other guy brought more chips and better cards. Michigan State does not need to force a ton of turnovers if they are going to win the rebounding battle, force you into tough twos, and get their own offense fueled by the crowd, the pace, and the sheer volume of extra possessions. Layer on that home resume, 8 wins in 9 tries this season and 23 wins in the last 25 at Breslin, and it feels much more like a test of how long Northwestern can hang around than a coin flip about who controls the night. So when you pull all of that together, it is not about brand names or green jerseys getting automatic respect. It is about a specific style matchup where one team's biggest strengths, physical defense, elite rebounding, layered half-court execution, line up almost perfectly against the other team's biggest vulnerabilities, a defense that has slipped and a front court that has already been bullied on the boards in its own gym. Northwestern's shooting and ball movement can absolutely steal stretches, and there is always a chance they spray in enough jumpers to stay inside the number for longer than anyone in green will enjoy. But over 40 minutes, with that crowd and that physical gap, it is very hard to shake the feeling that the favorites' advantages show up on the scoreboard in a pretty clear way by the final horn. As our first pick for this matchup, the Michigan State Spartans to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Michigan State's calling card is defense, sure, but this is not one of those rock fight teams that tries to drag every game into the 50s. They are comfortable playing in a modern Big Ten rhythm where you get long stretches of half-court execution, then suddenly 3 possessions of runouts and quick buckets that make the pace feel faster than it actually is. Northwestern, on the other hand, is living in that 80 points per game neighborhood on offense, with efficient shooting and a willingness to let their guards and wings create. And that is before you remember they just played an 84-78 game against Minnesota where both teams basically lived at the rim and the foul line late. Here is why that matters for the total. A team that rarely turns the ball over, like Northwestern, essentially guarantees possessions. Misses or makes, the ball is going up. There are not many wasted trips with live ball giveaways, which means more field goal attempts, more rebound chances, and more opportunities for the clock to stop on fouls. Now put that into a building where Michigan State's size and rebounding let them push off the defensive glass, and suddenly you have a game script that can swing between structured half-court sets and quick transition bursts without ever really slowing down. Even if the Spartans' defense forces a rough stretch or two for Northwestern, we have already seen that this Wildcats offense is good enough to respond with flurries, and their recent track record in league play, scoring in the high 70s while giving up numbers in the 80s, tells you the pace of scoring has been lively. On top of that, Big Ten officiating in January tends to reward physical play early, then whistle contact a bit more once both teams start attacking the paint. Michigan State's edge on the glass naturally creates more putback chances and more fouls on second efforts, and Northwestern's guards are aggressive enough to answer by hunting their own trips to the stripe rather than simply settling for jumpers all night. You put an efficient offense, a shaky defense, an elite defense that still creates second-chance looks, and two teams that have already played high-scoring, loose games this month into the same 40 minutes, and it is very easy to picture a final tally that ends up in the mid to high 40s, maybe even flirting with that 150 range if the late-game fouling kicks in. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Rutgers versus Illinois. This matchup looks like one of those classic late-night Big Ten spots where the number tells a very different story than the vibe. You have Illinois at 11 wins and 3 losses, sitting pretty in the rankings and rolling at home. And then you have Rutgers at 8 wins and 7 losses, still trying to prove it belongs in the same sentence, but quietly getting a little more annoying to play every week. On paper, it feels like the kind of game the favorite should put away early, yet the details of how these two actually function for 40 minutes point to something more stubborn from the visitors. Rutgers is not some helpless mid-major wandering into Champaign for a paycheck. They have already shown they can survive real punches, like clawing back to beat Oregon 88-85 in overtime and hanging within single digits at Ohio State, and those are the kinds of games that harden a locker room fast. You can see the identity forming on the fly. They scrap on the glass more than their raw rebounding numbers suggest. They chase turnovers, and they live at the free throw line in stretches, which is a nice little cheat code when you are trying to stick around as a big underdog because it slows the clock while the score still changes. Illinois, on the other hand, feels like the high-powered sports car that still has to obey traffic at certain points. They score a ton, they rebound everything, and they rain threes, averaging over 87 points per game with more than 10 made triples and over 42 rebounds. That sounds terrifying, and it is, but it also creates a very specific game script. When you are that explosive, you blow the doors off plenty of opponents, you build big leads, and then the human element kicks in. Coaches manage minutes, rotations get stretched, and the last 5 to 8 minutes can look very different from the first 15. Honestly, that is where spreads this big live and die. Here is the thing. Rutgers is not going to come in and win a beauty contest on offense, but Steve Pikiel's teams almost never roll over. This version has just enough creation from the guards to avoid the total scoring droughts that used to sink them, and when they get downhill, whistles usually follow. If they can turn this into one of those games where Illinois is a little uncomfortable, where possessions get choppy and Rutgers keeps forcing trips to the stripe, suddenly that huge margin the market is asking the favorite to cover has to survive a lot of small, annoying moments. Sprinkle in the emotional bump from finally grabbing that first conference win against Oregon, and you get a team that should walk into this one with a bit of swagger, not fear. Illinois still has plenty of ways to win comfortably, and nobody is pretending Rutgers is the better team here. But big numbers are not about who wins, they are about how the last few minutes look when the outcome is basically decided. If Rutgers keeps competing on every possession, keeps leaning into that physical style, and keeps forcing Illinois to play all 40 instead of coasting, that kind of underdog often proves a lot more stubborn than the line suggests. As our first pick for this matchup, the Michigan State Spartans to win and cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. On one side, you have an Illinois group that basically treats every home game like a scoring exhibition, putting up 87.1 points per night, shooting efficiently, and firing more than 29 threes per game. On the other side, you have a Rutgers team that, at first glance, looks pretty modest with 70.3 points per game, yet keeps finding itself in wild, high-scoring finishes like the 88-85 overtime win against Oregon, the 70-69 escape versus Penn, and the 84-72 shootout against Lehigh. If you look at how these games have actually played out, Rutgers has quietly leaned toward the kind of environment where points show up, with 8 overs and 7 unders so far. Illinois, funnily enough, has gone the other direction with 4 overs and 10 unders, but that has a lot to do with how brutally they smother weaker teams, holding them down while still scoring at will themselves. When a total sits in the mid-140s against an offense this explosive, a lot of those previous unders come from games that never really ask the opponent to keep up. Here, Rutgers has shown it can at least trade punches for long stretches, even when it is outgunned on paper. There is another layer. Illinois' style naturally inflates possession counts. They crash the glass hard, they push off misses, and they are not shy about letting threes fly early in the clock, which creates long rebounds, broken floor situations, and quick runouts both ways. Rutgers, meanwhile, tends to claw its way into the game at the free throw line with a very high free throws attempted to field goals attempted ratio, and that particular habit is gold for an over. Free throws stop the clock, the scoreboard still moves, and Illinois is not exactly a stranger to the foul line themselves, hitting nearly 79 to 80% as a team. So you can picture a rhythm where Illinois' shooting and pace drive the tempo. Rutgers answers by attacking, drawing contact, and cashing in at the stripe, and suddenly both teams are closer to their scoring ceilings than their floors. If Illinois does build a big lead, that does not automatically help an under either, because their depth can score, and Rutgers' rotation has already shown it can keep putting pressure on the rim deep into games instead of just dribbling the clock out and going home quietly. You get either a competitive game where both sides are trading buckets, or a chase mode script where the team behind has to keep firing. Both of those stories are friendly to points. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Ohio State versus Oregon. Picture this matchup for a second. Big Ten hoops stretching from Columbus to Eugene, a late-night tip in a loud arena, and the team with the cleaner resume walking and getting points instead of laying them. Ohio State comes in sitting at 10-4-0 overall and 2-2-0 in conference play, and if you peek at the scoreboard numbers, you see them putting up about 84.6 points per game while allowing only 72 points. Oregon, on its own floor, sits at 8-7-0 with a 1-3-0 start in league games, scoring around 77.7 a night and giving up roughly 73.3, which tells a softer story, more grind, less comfort. Those numbers alone paint a pretty simple picture. One team tends to win on the scoreboard by a wider band, the other lives a little closer to the edge. If you like blending the eye test with the nerdy stuff, most public analytic models lean a bit more toward the visitors as the more polished outfit, especially on the offensive side where their scoring punch and shooting efficiency show up night after night. It is not that Oregon is bad, it is more that Oregon looks streaky, capable of big pushes in that building but also of getting stuck in those 3-minute lulls that feel like an eternity when you are trying to win by margin. Here is where the spread gets interesting. The market is hanging Oregon around a 2.5-point favorite at Matthew Knight Arena, which is basically saying, we respect your gym, we respect your coach, but we are not quite convinced you are actually the better team on a neutral floor. Home court in college hoops is commonly worth about 3 points, give or take, so a small number like that hints that the underlying opinion quietly tilts toward the visitors, even if the scoreboard graphic on TV will flash the Ducks as favorites. So you get this combination that bettors quietly love, an offense that travels, that can function in the half court and does not need a fluky shooting night, matched up with a home favorite whose profile screams volatility more than dominance. In a game that is likely to feel like a possession-by-possession grind in the last few minutes, with both teams needing to execute sets rather than just run and gun, having the side that already lives comfortably in that high 70s to mid-80s scoring band, and that has shown a bit more balance front to back, becomes very appealing when you are also granted a handful of points as a cushion. As our first pick for this matchup, the Ohio State Buckeyes to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. Odds makers are setting the bar in the mid-150s, around 153.5, which sounds perfectly normal until you remember that one team is dropping about 84.6 per night and the other is around 77.7. If you do that quick mental addition in your head while you are scrolling scores on your phone, you land in the low 160s, so the posted total is asking you to believe the game will run a little cooler than what the raw scoring profiles suggest. And that does not automatically mean we are headed for some wild 162 to 158 kind of arcade game. Basketball almost never follows the script that cleanly. But what it does tell you is that a normal night for both offenses already leans higher scoring. Ohio State tends to live in the 80s, Oregon is comfortable living in the high 70s, and neither defense is exactly the swarming, suffocating type that erases mistakes on every trip. Both give up north of 70 on average, which usually keeps the door cracked open for runs. Here is the thing, stylistically, this does not really line up as an ugly rock fight. You have two teams that are more comfortable winning games with buckets than with 24 seconds of perfect containment every possession, and that shows up in their season scoring margins on both sides of the ball. Think of the way these games often feel on TV. One side hits back-to-back threes, the other answers with a quick 7-0 run, and before you know it, the total has quietly crept into the 140s by the under 8 timeout of the second half. The building itself matters too. Matthew Knight is one of those gyms where runs feel louder, the crowd gets up for transition chances and open threes, and that kind of atmosphere usually does not encourage slow, methodical half-court marathons. If this game stays reasonably competitive, which the tight spread suggests the market expects even if we are not talking about the number here for the pick itself, you also get all the little endgame ingredients that favor points, quick fouls, extended free throw sequences, and coaches using every timeout to squeeze an extra possession or two. Put that all together and you are basically looking at a matchup where both teams have shown they can live in that high 70s to low 80s range. The total is sitting a few points below what their combined scoring hints at, and the environment leans more toward spurts of offense than long, silent droughts. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. San Francisco versus Loyola Marymount. You have a late tip in Los Angeles, conference play in full swing, and two teams that know each other a little too well for anyone to feel comfortable laying more than a bucket. San Francisco walks in at 11-6 on the season, 3-1 in league play, sitting in that annoying sweet spot where they look good enough to scare the top of the West Coast but not quite flashy enough to grab national headlines. Loyola Marymount, on the other side, sits at 10-7, 1-3 in the conference, which feels like the record of a team that has looked great on some nights and downright stubborn on others, but also just got smacked around at Gonzaga and had all of those flaws shown on national TV. Here is the thing, San Francisco's profile this season is almost annoyingly solid. They score in the mid-70s, they allow opponents to live in the high 60s, and they do it with a very repeatable formula, spacing the floor, hunting threes, and owning the glass more often than not. That is not sexy on a highlight reel, but when you are catching a short number on the road, consistency is worth more than 1 or 2 wow games. They are also quietly top 100 nationally in overall efficiency with a positive scoring margin, which is exactly the profile of a team that tends to stay inside single possession spreads even when the environment gets a little loud. Now layer in the spot. Loyola Marymount has played a schedule that has tested them, and when they are rolling at Gersten Pavilion, it really does feel like one of those small gyms where momentum comes in 10-0 waves. The Lions shoot it well enough from 3, hovering in the high 30s from deep as a team, and they are scoring in the high 70s at home, which keeps them in almost everything. But the flip side is that they have been living in tight margins, and we just watched Gonzaga drag that offense into the mud and hold them in the 40s after a hot start, which is a reminder that if you can get them uncomfortable, the shots dry up fast. From a betting angle, the market is telling you this is basically a coin flip. Loyola Marymount is laying about a single point at home with a projected total sitting in the high 130s, so the books are saying neutral court these two are pretty equal right now. LMU has actually been the better ticket to hold against the spread so far, sitting at 10-6 ATS, but San Francisco is not exactly burning bankrolls at 8-8, and that slight LMU success is already baked into a line that still refuses to respect how well the Dons have traveled since late December. When you combine a near pick'em spread with a team that wins by almost 7 points a night on average, you are basically daring the underdog to keep doing what they do best, which is hang around, turn it into a 2-possession game late, and make every whistle matter. There is also a subtle style clash that actually helps the visitors. Both teams like to run at a tempo that is a touch above a true crawl but still very controlled, hovering in that mid-60s to around 70 possessions range. But San Francisco's half-court defense has been more trustworthy, and they are less reliant on one player going nuclear just to stay competitive. When you put a steady, multi-option offense and a connected defense into a tight number, you get a team that tends to play through foul trouble, through random runs, and through weird college basketball on a Thursday, things like a cold rim or an odd whistle. That is exactly the kind of profile you want anytime the spread is whispering, not shouting. We should talk about bodies, because those matter in January. For San Francisco, the official reports still tag key frontcourt pieces like Mookie Cook and Ndueto Nubri as dealing with lower body issues, listed as questionable for this stretch, which means you cannot assume full depth even though both remain on the active roster. LMU, on the other hand, comes in with no injuries listed on the major reports for this specific matchup, so they are closer to full strength, but that simply means we have a more honest read on who they are rather than some hidden ceiling waiting to show up. So yes, the Lions have the home gym, the energy, and the cleaner bill of health, but the Dons have that seasoned, road-tested feel where their floor game looks very similar night after night, and that is exactly what you want when the spread is asking, can you just keep this close? As our first pick for this matchup, the San Francisco Dons to cover the spread as underdogs, ISO your full game side pick. You look at that projected total in the high 130s, and at first glance, it feels a little conservative for two teams that are both comfortably scoring in the mid-70s on the season. San Francisco is living in that 70-plus window while holding opponents in the high 60s, which sets a base expectation in the low 40s on an average night, and LMU's own scoring profile is almost a mirror, with the Lions at about 77 per game and giving up just under 69. So before you even factor in game script, you already have a matchup where both sides are used to playing games that settle a few points north of where this total is hanging. Here is where it gets interesting. Loyola Marymount at home has been playing in some very friendly environments for higher totals. The Lions shoot the three well in their own building, they are happy to let it fly, and the recent betting history in this gym shows the full game number drifting over more often than not, with the total cashing on the high side in a clear majority of their recent home dates. That is not just random noise, it lines up with what your eyes see on film, an offense that can get loose from deep, plus a defense that, while solid, is not so ruthless that it turns every game into a half-court rock fight. San Francisco's style also nudges this game toward a bit more scoring than a raw tempo number might suggest. The Dons sit in that lower to middle tempo tier, but they space the floor, hunt early threes when they have clean looks, and get to the foul line at a healthy clip, all of which are friendly ingredients for totals, especially in tight games where both teams are still playing their main guys in the final minute. You can have a game that feels patient, even slow at times, and still quietly stack points when the possessions are efficient. The three ball is a real weapon on both sides, and free throws are not a problem. Recent form supports that story too. I know MU has been involved in a stretch of games where the scoreboard has leaned higher, with several of their recent contests sailing over their closing numbers, especially at home. San Francisco has been a bit more balanced on the totals ledger, sitting under more than over so far, but that has often been in games where they were either heavy favorites grinding out business at home or dealing with opponent styles that drag things down. This matchup is different. You have two capable offenses, both comfortable in the mid-range and at the arc, defenses that are good but not suffocating, and a spread tight enough that late-game fouling is firmly on the table if this thing is sitting within a possession in the final minute. And that is the little twist people forget. When the spread is essentially 1 point either way, coaches play to win, not to protect margins. You get quicker shots out of timeouts, you get the 2-for-1 thinking even in college, and if the game is stuck on a 3 to 5 point difference late, you get the stop clock parade to the line that can turn a total sitting around 130 into 138 in about 40 real-time seconds. Nothing about these two defenses screams lockdown in that chaotic endgame setting, and both offenses have enough veteran guards and forwards to hit late freebies at a decent rate. So when you put it all together, you have two offenses that are already living above this number on an average night, a home floor that has seen plenty of higher scoring outcomes, a spread that encourages late fouls, and pace profiles that are deliberate but not glacial, which is a sneaky sweet spot for totals that clear their posted number without feeling like track meets. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Santa Clara versus Gonzaga. Santa Clara is walking back into Spokane for a late-night West Coast Conference game on national television, and the books have planted a huge number between these Broncos and Gonzaga. You have a Gonzaga team that looks every bit like a national contender again, sitting at 16-1 on the season and perfect at 4-0 in league play. But the spread is asking them to win by basically 2 touchdowns against a conference rival that has started 13-4 and also sits at 4-0 in the West Coast Conference. That is not a casual tax. That is the market telling you this Gonzaga offense can blow almost anyone out, and that most people are still remembering the old West Coast Conference script where the Zags cruise at home and everyone else just tries to keep it respectable. Here is where things get more interesting if you are even a little contrarian. Santa Clara is not walking in like a typical underdog that just slows it down, hits a few threes, then happily takes a moral victory. They are playing fast, they are playing confident, and they are built in a way that can really annoy a big favorite. They average north of 80 points per night, they shoot a lot of threes, and they crash the offensive glass like it is a full-time job. When you combine a live underdog that loves extra possessions with a favorite that thrives on tempo, you get something bettors quietly love: long stretches where that big number starts to feel very fragile. Think about what Santa Clara actually wants in this kind of game. They want possessions, they want pace, they want Gonzaga's bigs pulled away from the rim to guard shooters, then punished when the ball comes off the rim and the Broncos send multiple bodies to the boards. That style does not just keep you in touch on the scoreboard, it keeps you in touch against big spreads, because every second chance bucket and every run of made threes cuts straight into that cushion. And it is not like this building is some mystery to them anymore. Last season, Santa Clara came into Spokane and walked out with that wild 103-99 win, their first victory here since the mid-2000s, and they did it by hitting a ridiculous number of threes and refusing to sag when Gonzaga punched back. When a program has already proven to itself that it can score with Gonzaga in this gym, even once, that confidence does not just vanish, especially when the core identity, shoot a ton of threes and attack the glass, is still very much in place. Now flip it around from Gonzaga's side for a second. They are still elite, they are still steamrolling teams a lot of nights, they are still winning by huge margins on average, but that does not automatically mean they are a great covering machine at these inflated numbers. The recent against the spread record has been more human than terrifying, and some of those wins have turned into what every favorite backer dreads: comfortable straight-up victories where the last 4 minutes turn into empty-calorie Santa Clara buckets that only matter to people staring at tickets. When you combine Gonzaga's love of getting out and running with Santa Clara's refusal to slow down, you create the perfect recipe for the Broncos to keep sneaking back through the back door whenever this one looks like it is about to completely tip over. So in a matchup where both teams can score, both teams are rolling in league play, and the number is asking Gonzaga to keep their foot down for the full 40, there is a very real case that the team catching the points is the more comfortable side. The Broncos do not have to win this thing outright to make their backers happy. They just have to keep playing their brand of basketball deep into the second half, trading punches and hitting just enough threes that the home crowd is excited, but the spread never feels totally safe. As our first pick for this matchup, the Santa Clara Broncos to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. We are looking at a projected total in the mid-160s, which is the kind of bar that makes most casual fans blink. But then you remember who is playing here and how they actually score. Gonzaga is sitting in that 90-plus points per game neighborhood on the season with video game level efficiency, and they do it without needing a track meet every night. They just keep running good offense, cutting hard, sharing the ball, and turning small windows into easy points. Santa Clara is not exactly shy about offense either. They are over 80 points per game. They live at the three-point line. They chuck around 30 triples a night, and they attack the offensive glass so hard that even empty possessions often turn into second chances. That combination matters for a total like this, because when you shoot a lot of threes you create volatility, and when you rebound like crazy you reduce wasted trips. So one good shooting stretch can push a game from "this feels reasonable" to "how are we already at 90 combined at halftime?" We have also already seen what this matchup can look like in this building when both offenses are flowing. That 103-99 Santa Clara upset in Spokane was not some defensive grind that turned late. It was an offensive showcase where the Broncos hit 18 threes and Gonzaga still nearly put up 100 themselves. The important part is not living in the past, it is remembering the template. Pace was high, threes were flying, whistles did not completely choke the rhythm, and both teams showed they are comfortable playing a game that feels more like a track meet than a chess match. If you look at how these two have behaved lately, the story fits the eye test. Santa Clara games have tilted heavily toward higher scoring, with a bunch of recent contests sailing past their posted totals, and their road profile is even wilder, with overs cashing again and again once they get out of the Levy Center comfort zone. Gonzaga, for their part, can absolutely lock in defensively for stretches, but their combination of fast offense, deep rotation, and willingness to keep pushing the ball even with a lead has produced plenty of high-scoring finishes, especially when they see another team that is not scared to trade haymakers. Here is the thing that quietly matters for a number this high. You do not necessarily need a perfect shooting night from both sides. You need pace, you need enough made threes to keep runs alive, and you need a whistle that rewards aggressive drives instead of letting defenders mug cutters without consequence. Santa Clara's style, hunting threes and then crashing for putbacks, tends to produce those little pockets of chaos that lead to fouls and free throws. Gonzaga's style, pressing the gas in transition and constantly probing with ball screens, produces open looks, corner threes, and mismatches that also put opponents in foul trouble. When you add it up over 40 minutes in a packed building on national television, with both teams trying to send a message in a battle of unbeaten West Coast Conference records, it is very easy to imagine stretches where the scoreboard operator barely sits down. So yes, this total is high, and yes, it will scare some people away. But the matchup profile, recent trends, and the way both coaches are comfortable letting their teams run all lean toward a game with long scoring runs, quick answers, and very little dead time. If the shooting is even good enough instead of cold, this kind of tempo and shot volume can make a mid-160s total look a lot more manageable than it appears on paper. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.